Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to Vlog 191, how to improve your chances of gaining an academic job. Yes, crunchy, robust, important, and perhaps this vlog is a little bit confronting. So warning there at the start. It comes via request from a wonderful young man who would like to remain anonymous, and I will absolutely respect that, but thank you for this request. It is a great one. And further, the wonderful man that is Todd. Todd came to my office a couple of days before I was finishing off writing this vlog, and Todd was very conscious of how to manage the relationship between finishing a PhD and taking that next leap or stage into the workplace, and work through a series of strategies that he believed was incredibly important. And Todd, we will deliver on those, and in many ways this vlog is a first step to set the scene for us to create those scaffolding programs. So Todd, as always, thank you for your expertise. And look, I am going to be honest with you, this is an incredibly tough time for universities, tough time to work in them. And look, critical university studies, which is a fascinating research area, critical university studies in which I work, is dominated by one word at the moment. And you can see it in the titles and the books and the chapter titles, and that word is crisis. Universities in crisis. The crisis in our universities. Crisis, 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 crisis. Great. But for me, what this crisis is about is a crisis of purpose. What are we meant to be doing in our universities? Are we developing a knowledge economy? Are we skilling a workforce? Are we masking unemployment and underemployment? Are we the R&D arm of a range of industries? As public funding has declined for teaching and research, and we're working with a whole series of industries to wrangle money for our research, it really does raise the question, what are we here for? What are we doing? What's the point of a university? And I can hear one of your answers, Tara, the point of a university is, I want a job in one. I want a job, and good on you. Because one thing we often forget is that the university is a workplace, and an incredible diversity of workers are part of higher education, and that's powerful and wonderful and good. But I think we focus far too little on the university as a workplace, because we still have those leftovers of Cardinal Newman's The Idea of the University, with all that stuff about, it's a vocation. Academics are like the clergy. We're drawn to it because it's a vocation. Well, that's nonsense, to be honest with you. We need to park that, and we need to look at the university as a workplace, because you need a job. You need to be able to buy food, you need to be able to pay rent, maybe get a mortgage one day. You need to be able to eke out or structure a life. I get that. I really do. And you know that because I work in higher education studies, I don't romanticise universities at all. At all. I've worked in, 9 universities in 4 countries. And I have seen the worst of humanity. I have seen the most disgraceful behaviour. I have seen the kicking and the destruction of the vulnerable, and to this day I have horror stories that circulate in my mind. They don't go away. So we can do better, we must do better, and we do better not by romanticising a past of higher education that didn't actually exist, but by actually looking at the workplace, the university as the workplace. And it is tough to get work in that workplace, and it is tough to stay in work. And that's why only 40% of people with a PhD decide to stay in this workplace, to stay and continue in universities. 60% take their PhD and work in and out throughout the rest of the economy. But for those of you that want to increase your chances of working within a university in these tough times, let's do it. And I may upset you, for which I apologise. Please email me, we'll talk about it, it's great. But I can't lie to you. And so let's do this. What I'm trying to do is be honest and increase your chances of getting academic work. Now, I could go round and through the networking path. All the lecturers, networking. Well, what does networking even mean? And the first thing about networking is it's relinquishing some of your power to what other people can do for you. Because networking is also, I'll meet and engage with this person because they may be useful to me. And you've relinquished power when you've done that. Whereas what I'm focusing on today are strategies you can do, today, tomorrow, next week, next month, in a decade's time, to increase your chances for academic work. And firstly, we just have to talk through the nature of the higher education workforce. What is happening right now has never happened in the history of higher education before. Let me talk through the characteristics. The first thing that is happening is that the low-level or starter positions that people with a PhD used to step into, they've started to disappear. Not only are postdocs increasingly rare, there's that whole story, but the starter positions in Australia, the A-level lectureship posts, the non-tenured post in the North American system, the low-level lectureship post in the United Kingdom, those posts have disappeared, increasingly so. In fact, I can't remember the last time I saw an A-level lectureship post advertised. So the first rung of the ladder that you used to be able to step onto, that's gone. And they're disappearing because of the casualisation of the higher education workforce. So if teaching is to be conducted, then casual staff complete it. So this group has been labelled the precariat by Guy Standing, and he in fact used the higher education workforce as an example of his book exploring the precariat. So what happens in that casualised workforce is you will earn money for teaching during the term or during the semester, but then the money will stop. So you don't have sick leave, you don't have holiday leave, you don't have any conditions, you're paid for the teaching work you do, and it stops and it's unstable. Now that precariat, that casualised academic workforce, is internationally huge right now. So with this baseline point of higher education disappearing, what do you do now? Now this situation is made worse. Can it be worse? Yeah, it can. It's made worse by the fact that anywhere between 30 and 60%, we'll never really know, 30 and 60% of jobs that are advertised are already filled. There's either a favoured candidate, so a job is being advertised to put a favoured candidate in, or indeed people are applying for their own job. So we've got an increase in, of course, contract labour in university. So a contract finishes, the university advertises that post, but of course there's an incumbent who's applying for their own job, and it's very hard to dislodge an incumbent. So as you can see, a stack of these jobs that appear to be available are not, and the baseline jobs that PhD students used to go into are disappearing. Isn't this going well? So what happens now? The answer is two things. Firstly, you have to be agile. So you have to make every post a winner. So if an opportunity comes up for a short-term contract, a backfill post, maternity leave, paternity leave, filling in for someone on research leave, you need to take that job immediately. And remember, don't forget about regional areas. Work the regional universities. So you must be agile. But secondly, and this is an important one, and it's so difficult, you need to do the scaffolding work that'll bridge that gap between where you are as a completed PhD student and getting you to, in the Australian system, a B-level academic post or tenure track in the North American system. Now this is really tough. This is a fight because the standards are so much higher. But look, I'll do something a little bit positive here too, because this university workplace will every now and again surprise you. In fact, it surprises me a lot. And just to give you a sense of this, I've done over 50 I felt it too. Over 50 interviews in the last 5 or 6 years in my last couple of jobs, and I've either been sort of like on a panel in my university or my last one, or as an external panel member for universities around the world. So that means I've seen academic interviews from all disciplines, from philosophy and fine art right the way through to engineering, and it's been amazing. And what I've learnt is that the academic workplace is a really, really fickle beast. Sometimes, occasionally, we get a huge field, hundreds of applications. And just as frequently, we only get 3 or 4. And it's not where you expect. So when I look at that job, oh, it's going to be a big field there. Nothing. And one where you go, oh, that's really specialist, and in the applications come. So let me tell you one true story about an executive dean post. An executive dean post at a regional university. This is a true story. Okay, executive dean, boom. 2 people applied. They were both shortlisted, but between the shortlisting process and the conducting of the interview, one of the applicants, the favoured applicant, pulled out. So there was a field of 1. That person was interviewed. She wasn't very good, but she got the job. And she was dean for 10 years. So therefore, we never know what's going to happen, actually. We never know who's going to apply, what's going to occur. It is astounding. It's not what it appears. So my advice would be as follows. When you're putting in an application, when an ad comes up, put in the best application that you can. Make every post a winner, work hard. And do that not once, but do it for 10 jobs. Do it for 15 jobs. Do it for 20 jobs. Have lots of jobs going at once. Give it everything. Put in a great application. But then this is the important bit. Don't be wedded to the outcome. So don't get terribly emotionally involved in shortlisting or not shortlisting, interviewing, not interviewing, getting the job. Put a great application in, put a lot of applications in, but don't judge yourself on the impact or movement of that application, because you never quite know what's happening on the other side. And what we've done so far is we've talked about other people, so what's happening in institutions and how they're hiring people. The rest of the vlog is focusing very, very evenly on you, what you can do and what you have control over. And look, today's a bit of a mirror vlog. I want you to look at yourself, look at your career, look at your CV evenly, and ask yourself, would you hire you? Tough question. We also have to remember Karl Marx's double freedom. This is incredibly relevant here. Karl Marx argued that we as workers have 2 freedoms. The first is a recognition that all we have to sell is our labour power. So we have the freedom to sell our labour power. But the second freedom is just as important. We have the freedom to sell that labour power to anyone. Okay, so all we have is labour power to sell, but we can sell it to everyone. So what I'm doing today is I'm focusing on that first freedom, labour power. What labour power have you got to sell, and improving that labour power? So how can you contribute to a university? How can you contribute to the teaching of students, the construction of a curriculum, the configuration of really high quality, innovative research, but also contributing to university service and community service? As an individual academic employed in a university, it's very different from being a PhD student. It is. When you're a PhD student, you can blame other people. So as a PhD student, we know that. You can blame people. So it's like, it's not about you, it's always you. Blame the supervisor, blame the university, blame the Dean of Graduate Research, blame higher education, blame your mother. You know, you can always blame somebody else. Like, I'm like this because of my mother. I'm like this because my supervisor hasn't done this. So in a PhD program, you can blame other people. And the hard reality once you're an academic is that the buck stops with you. You can blame nobody. If it goes wrong, it's your fault. And even if in some ways it's not your fault, you're responsible for it. So that's a huge gulf to make. So you have to ask yourself, what have you got that is of value? What can you sell to an employer. The mistake almost always made in interviews is in response to that first handball question. And people lose a job in the first 2 minutes of an interview. The first handball question is often something like, what made you apply for this job? What interested you in this position? And what invariably people do is a complete stuff up. So what they do is they then go into this narrative about me. Let me tell you about me and why I'm interested in this and why I should be doing this. And what happens is they talk about themselves endlessly. They talk about their families. Oh, this would be a great place to settle my family. Or my wife already works in this city, or I really like this city. So it's all about me, 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 me. And you've lost the job at that point. Because universities don't care at all about how you're thinking or how you're feeling or if you'd be happy in the job. Zero interest. Zero interest. Because, and if you get nothing else out of this vlog, maybe remember this. A university only advertises a job when there is a problem to solve. I'll say that again. A university only advertises a job when there is a problem to solve. When they've got a little problem to solve, they'll throw some casual hours at it. So, if it's a little problem, we'll put some casual time on that, we'll solve it with a short-term band-aid solution. But if they've got a bigger problem, they'll need to hire somebody. Because if there's no problem, why would they spend the money? If they've got a problem, they have to spend the money. So when you're applying for academic jobs, recognise that you've got to work out what is the problem that they are trying to solve, and then demonstrate how your strengths can solve that problem. So don't just go, oh, let's do a catalogue of how fantastic I am. Zero bothers. No one cares. That's great. What are your strengths, and how can those strengths help the university? What can you do for them? It's like rewriting that old JFK line, ask not what your university can do for you, but what you can do for that university. And be honest with yourself. What sort of skills have you got to sell? If you were a university, would you hire you? Think about the tens of thousands of truly brilliant and interesting people on this planet. Why would you get a job over them? And you need to have an answer to that question. And that's actually what we're going to do in the vlog now. So all I'm going to do, and it is a bit confrontational, I know, I'm going to talk about 5 areas for you to think about. You can absolutely disagree with me. But when you're asking yourself, what have I got to sell? Here are the 5 areas for you to work on to have something to sell. 1, teaching matters. Now I know a lot of the attention is on research. Research is spectacularly important, and that's my second point. But you need to remember that teaching pays the bills of our universities. Not research, teaching does. Further, if you are a dreadful teacher and the students fail or the students attrit, firstly, you ruin that individual student's life. So hashtag no pressure. So if a student fails and you were the teacher, I always say, what was that old line? That if a teacher teaches and the student doesn't learn, then the teacher actually hasn't taught. Have a think about that. But what I'd say is, so you've ruined that student's life because they've failed or they've attritted, but actually you've hurt the financial stability of the university, because the university needs students to enrol, they need students to move through first year, which is always challenging, and move through the undergraduate degree and get a good qualification. Now, in some universities and for some student cohorts, that's incredibly tough, because the students are arriving in our classrooms incredibly underprepared. Okay, so there might be issues that are happening in higher education in particular disciplines. We know there are. Students from regional, from country areas have to confront a whole series of quite challenging teaching experiences, what's often called the teaching churn in rural and regional areas. So they've got patchy or uneven teaching, and so they come to the university unprepared. So they're hard to teach. So the question is, how you, as an educator in a university, how can you manage that group? How can you help those individual students be successful? Do you know how to do that? And that's a particularly challenging case to make to a future employer if you've only done casual work, which is what most PhD students have done. So therefore, there is a solution. For whatever casual work you've done, I want you to reflect back on it. I want you to think about individuals that you helped to succeed and how you did that. or a cohort of students in a lab or group work or a tutorial where something went wrong, this was a problem, and how you fixed it, right? So they're the first two stages. This was a problem, this is how I fixed it, but then I need you to go one more stage. This is how I fixed it, and this is the meta or the bigger point about teaching and learning in universities and how I solve problems that we learn from this case study. So start to think about examples. What went wrong, what you did, and what we learned from it. That's important. Now you must also fill in your gaps in your teaching and learning career through professional development. So what can't you do? Do you know about curricular design? Do you know about multimodality? Do you know about cascading assessment? Do you know about differential learning? Do you know about any of this stuff? If you don't, you need to plug in PD. Put in professional development and it goes in your CV. So there's a CV about teaching professional development and list the professional development that you have done. And that's important because it shows that you're interested in teaching and learning, that you're a lifelong learner, all good. And it also suggests that you know what your weaknesses are and you're solving them, that you know what you are doing. And even if you think of yourself as a researcher, that's great. Always remember, it's teaching that pays the university's bills. And team, the great teacher that is also a great researcher, wow. That is a really, really rare bird. As someone who did the institutional submission for the RAE and the REF in the United Kingdom, can I say the very few number of people that had an outstanding teaching career, outstanding research career, and were also a great PhD supervisor, less than a handful in an entire university. So if you've got everything, you're a rare bird and you'll always be employable. And I recommend, therefore, not only our professional development at Flinders, and we have a wonderful suite of programs to do this for you, but also please use MOOCs. There's all sorts of wonderful MOOCs on teaching and learning, and use LinkedIn Learning. I really recommend that. And look, it's pretty expensive, except the first 30 days are free. So this is great. And why LinkedIn Learning is great is that they're very sharp infusions of PD, very short. So here's a topic, you do that topic, you get a certificate, it's clear that you've done that expertise, right? So I believe, team, one of the reasons I have been solidly in work throughout my entire career is because I've always taken teaching seriously. Always. You will never hear me disrespect it. Teaching is the lifeblood of our universities. And unbelievably, that's existed right through my career. When I started my research master's degree, so when I was at the University of Western Australia, and this gives you the sense of what's changed in our universities, casual work was incredibly rare. Being able to do a tutorial, incredibly rare, because academics did their own teaching. So academics did their own tutorials, academics did their own lab work, yeah? So it meant that there was very little casual work. So at the University of Western Australia, they rendered the desire for casual work competitive. So all the higher degree students had to apply to see whether or not they could be a teaching apprentice. I know it sounds very Jedi, doesn't it? It's like, so I was one of those, I only gave two, who would become a teaching apprentice, and I was one of them. And if you became a teaching apprentice, you got to teach, you got to do some tutorials. You also got a once a week mentoring meeting with an academic. Bless, look how old this language is, it's fantastic. But also, and the most important bit, is I got to do 12 weeks of a professional development course, rare at the time, on teaching and learning in higher education, worth thousands of dollars. And I still remember it as truly brilliant. And I would never have had the money to pay for it. But it was an incredible experience. And in many ways, my career started from that research master's degree, but also that 12-week course. And look, from there, I loved it so much. I was so interested. I went on and then did a Bachelor of Education, a Master's of Education, a graduate diploma in Internet Studies that specialised on how we make online learning work properly. And look, wow, I got a National Teaching Award when I was very, very young. Best teacher in the country when I was very young. Got 6 teaching awards around the world. First year through to PhD. My favourite award, which is incredibly meaningful to me, is the Teaching Excellence Award for students with a disability. So they're one of them. It meant a lot to me. But what that means, the awards don't mean anything, but they're a proxy for something. They're a proxy that teaching matters to me and I can solve problems. So you can throw me into just about any system in the world, any discipline, throw me in, explain to me the problem, and I will develop a curriculum for you. I will develop a cascading assessment. I'll use multimodality in a way that will allow you to teach those students with success. I can solve problems. So can you. But you need to take professional development seriously and plug those gaps for me. What can you do well in teaching and learning? What do you need to fix? And fix it now through PD. 2, publishing. Wow, you thought that was hard. Hang on. This is going to be the controversial bit, and my apologies, but I've got to be real here. I've got to be absolutely real with you now. We all know the cliche, publish or perish, and I hate cliches because they're simplistic language, they're simplistic ideas, but let's dig into this one a little bit more. Because the actual point is, if you don't publish a lot, you're just not going to be competitive. You're just going to be nowhere near where you need to be. And this is the reason why I laugh, and can I say I laugh quite a lot, when people try to explain to me how important the PhD by publication, not prior, the PhD by publication is. And of course, these people explain it to me, and they're always from the disciplines where the academics write with their students. So they're magically quite fascinated by the PhD by publication and how it's explained to me. And I love how people sort of explain stuff to the Dean of Graduate Research like we don't know what's going on, but still. So how it's explained to me is, oh Tara, the PhD by publication is really good because you've got 3 articles, so you just publish 3 articles, there's an introduction and there's a conclusion and you're out. Right. Sometimes that narrative is rewritten so it's 5 articles, that's pretty rare, so 5 articles, introduction, conclusion, out. Let's do this. Do you really think that 3 or 4 or 5 articles produced in 4 years is going to make you competitive for any job ever? Really? I often get that argument that people assume I'm against publishing during a PhD. Nothing could be further from the truth. It shows you know nothing about me and nothing about my students. My students during a PhD, they are an engine room. They produce 8 articles, 9 articles, 10 articles. They power out the pieces. So the reason why my students write these big theses is because you can get a lot of articles out of the traditional thesis. So I went back to my CV to just check, am I reading this backwards, what was going on? So I looked at my CV at the point that I applied for my first 18-month academic post, right? So where was I, going to a regional university, where was I at that point that I applied for that job? Well, I had 14 singly authored articles and a book chapter applying for that job, and then through my PhD I had 12 articles that came from my PhD and 2 more that came from outtakes from that PhD. Now I see so many students in my office and they sit down and they're devastated, and I'm devastated for them, and they're chatting with me and saying, Tara, I wasn't even shortlisted for this job, can we work through what I'm doing wrong? And I look at the CV and they've got 1 refereed article from their honours year that's out and 2 currently under review. Now, would you be shortlisted for a post with that? Of course you wouldn't. And I think part of what's happening, there are problems in the sciences, problems in the social sciences, problems in the humanities. Each discipline sort of has similar problems in how we're configuring articles, I think. But let me just give you a quick couple of examples about this. Let's start with the hard sciences, shall we? How articles are configured in the traditional empirical lab-based sciences is part of the challenge, because supposedly, and this has been again explained to me, there are 2 types of articles in the sciences. There's the review article and there's an article. So the review article is obviously based on the student's literature review. I know how quaint, the literature review in a PhD, and that becomes a review article. That's fine. Not a worry. And then there is the article. Now, what's the missing adjective there? Well, often that's the technical article or that's the empirical article. That's the stuff. Now, do you really think that there are only 2 types of articles that are available in our disintermediated, deterritorialised age? Do you really think that? Think about the really innovative research that's happening at the moment. There are so many fantastic journals out there and brilliant research out there. And if I can just give you, I've got two fantastic examples that I'm obsessed about. The Review of Scientific Instruments. I'm obsessed by this journal. It is wonderful. It's edgy, it's provocative, it's excellent. And why it matters is you might remember through some of the videos where we featured students in these vlogs and also in our podcast series, you've often heard some of our younger PhD students graduating from the lab-based science and they said, oh look, I lost 8 months or I lost 9 months setting up the equipment for the lab. And firstly, that's a great line on your CV. How many people have a chance to set up tech for a lab? Come on, boom, add that to your CV. But then my question has always been, why didn't you write that up? Write that up and do an article. There's a journal for it. Find it. And also, most of you know I'm obsessed by this journal. The Journal of Negative and Null Results. I love this journal. This journal is fantastic. So for those of you that say, oh look, I did an experiment and nothing happened, just didn't work. There's a journal for that. And it's a great journal. It's like, I did this and it was all going well and then nah. So look, that's a great journal, and actually it's a great journal for many reasons. Firstly, some amazing writing happens in that journal, but also can I say it does the scientific community a service. It stops other people wasting time. So remember the diversity of journals that are out there, and the diversity of journals is increasing. So start to understand the shape of scholarly publishing. Also remember the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning Journals, SOTL or ISOTL, the International Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, incredibly important. Science communication journals, science media journals, science education journals, and again the publishing of the teaching-led science-based work is important. Firstly, it shows you're reflexive about teaching. Remember my first point. Secondly, if you research in that area, it's a high cite area. So get in there and publish. Always remember the diversity of publishing options that are available to you, so far beyond the traditional 2 or 3 articles that emerge from a PhD. Remember, it's in your interest to be innovative, to publish hard, to find the new publishing opportunities. Now, for our crew in the humanities, we're less wedded to, oh right, there are 2 genres of articles. So we haven't got necessarily that problem to worry about. And we know there are book reviews, work the book reviews, the longer review articles, which are also excellent. But what I would say to the humanities crew, and you so rarely go here, remember this. This is a tip for punters, right? Look for journals and their special issues. Because here's your research for your PhD, and there'll be a bit of that research that you can just tilt to move into a special issue. So work the special issues through your candidature as well. You remember also, work SOTL, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, huge number of journals, high cite. And also monitor those short books, very important for the social sciences as well. So if one of your chapters is becoming huge, and this happens in most theses, you write and you go, wow, how big does this thing get? You know, it's 10,000 words, well, what? And then it's 15, and look, keep going. I'll tell you why. Because that chapter, yes, you will have to cut it down for the thesis, but keep going, because that can then become a short book for Springer, for Emerald, for Oxford University Press. Most journals have a type of short book at the moment. It's terrific. Works great for methods and methodology. Catherine, your work on rurality, a great example of that. Started as a chapter, ended up 50,000 words. So it'll end up, we're truncating it back as a chapter now, but that book in and of itself is self-standing. So before you've actually submitted your PhD, you've got a short book and then all the other articles that come from it. So as you can see, you are competing with the world. You have to bring it. You have to bring it hard, okay? And every single year since 1997, no matter what has happened, I have published between 5 and 10 refereed articles. And remember, I've never had a sabbatical. I've never had a research only job. Mine has been teaching and research all the way through. I've never had a month off for any sort of research leave, okay? So I've put the research around the teaching. And even in bad years, that still happened. And look, 10 is a great year. Done it a few times, it's been fantastic. But I never go below the benchmark of 5 articles a year. So commit to publishing. Commit to the diversity of publishing. There is a great diversity of refereed scholarship out there. Remember, focus on open access so that people can read it. But you know what? Make every post a winner. Every few thousand words you write, you go, oh, right. I wonder if I could just add a bit more, and that becomes a refereed article. Research, great researchers grind out the results, grind out the papers, make it work. And I just want to make one more point that, again, this may be the important part that might actually change your life, about how you organise your CV. And you present your research to prospective employers. Now, I've done this since I was a very young postgraduate student. So your CV should have a lot of headings at this point. So whenever something happens and it's a new area, add a heading, add the thing. And do not be worried at all by the length. We're random people that go, a CV is 6 pages in length. That's for the corporate world. We'll do different sorts of CVs there. As academics, my CV clicked over to 61 pages this morning. People I admire, great men and women, older academics who've had a distinguished career, people I respect enormously. Their CV can go up to 100 pages. The reason being, we got a lot of stuff. If you've got 200 plus articles, that takes some room. If you've got 20 books, that takes some room, okay? So when you've done more, just let the length extend. People are cool with it. If you've got a lot of stuff, if you've done a lot of stuff, it's on the CV. At this stage though, you're just developing organically your achievements. So whack in headings like teaching, professional development, books if you've got them, book chapters, refereed articles, conference papers, conference presentations, conference proceedings if you've got that, hi to our engineers, journalism, any other heading that is useful to you. But the trick is, I think, is that employers need to see your publishing trajectory. This changed my life, it might change yours. So I have a few more headings. I have refereed articles, which are the articles I have published. I then have as a separate heading, articles under review, and list all of those. Then I have another heading, articles currently being prepared. Now this is great for me because I have a lot of movement between those categories. It helps me keep track of it. So here's the stuff I'm working on. When it's finished, it goes under review, and if I'm successful with refereeing, it goes up to published. So these 3 categories are endlessly working. Great for you, but why it's important to get an academic job and future employers is that they can see that you're research active now, but you've got a pipeline. And this is so important as you're moving out of a PhD, because the last thing employers want is, okay, you've had all this support and a supervisor and stuff to produce a PhD, what happens to this person when they're on their own? And all those supports are taken away. So you need to show, right, this is the stuff I've done and that's published. This is the stuff that's under review. And this is the stuff I'm working on. There's a pipeline. So they know that when you arrive, you're not going to stop. That when you arrive, you've got a pipeline. You're an engine room for publishing. They need to see the momentum. They'll give you confidence, and them confidence, that when you take on a job, that you will be successful and the publications will continue. And that matters to me as much as to you guys. When people look at my CV, I always try and gift a new employer with at least 1 book and maybe 2. So I arrive, and within a couple of months they've got a new book. So it brands up the university, brands up my movement there, and it shows, right, well, this person's arrived and they're arriving with some momentum. 3, master alternative modes of dissemination. You have to be visible. You have to demonstrate communication skills, and it has to bounce off your CV that you have communication skills, and you've got to fill up as much of the first page of Google as you can with really high quality materials. So you have to find strategies to connect your research with an audience. Do not assume, you can never assume that just because you publish something, people will read it. There's too much stuff out there, guys, they won't. You publish something, you have to find your audience, find your readers. And look, at this point, you may not have many articles in your career. You might have under 20, you might have under 10, you might have under 5. And therefore, you have to make every single post a winner. Make every single article a big deal. Like it's a release of the new Star Wars blockbuster. Here's a new article, bing, 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 bing. It's big. Make it big. How do you make it big? Well, one, record a video abstract. We had an earlier vlog on that. 3 minutes to camera. Here's what this research is about. Great article. It does this, 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 and this. In the information section on YouTube, put a link to the article. It lifts your citations. It shows you're a great communicator. You can talk about research. It also shows you're a good teacher. Multiple big wins there. And also, remember, the citations lift enormously. Also, another great strategy around an article that's just been published is to record a podcast that tells the story of the research, which is great. Suits podcast beautifully. Longer piece. This is how I came to the research. This is what interests me. This is what was published. And this is why it matters to this audience. You can be much more evocative, okay? Now, later in your career, when you've got 200 articles, this stuff won't matter as much. But at this point, early on, you have to make every single post a winner. And while you're talking about research, you're not only demonstrating your content or subject expertise, but your communication skills and your capacity to convey ideas. Incredibly important. 4, oh yeah, journalism. Journalism. Remember, what we're trying to do at this point of your career is add lines to your CV. We're trying to do things that add lines to your CV that you have control over, to show your wares and show your future, show what you can do. Now, part of the point of the dissemination of this research is to build your visibility. So this may involve writing a blog, and I know a lot of you have decided to do that and are doing that incredibly well. Terrific strategy. So writing a blog, great. Also writing pieces for your professional organisations, incredibly important in education and allied health. Keep going. I know a lot of you are doing that. Terrific. Then there is journalism. Journalism does matter. It's a series of skills, and it is a great skill to be able to crank out 1,000 words in powerful language that can find an audience. Really important. It's a rare gift, and it lifts your profile and your visibility. In a university, it's a really, really rare skill. It's a valuable skill because in some ways it's free advertising. So if you as an individual can produce high quality research and high quality journalism, then you're marketing and branding your university, your research, and yes, you. So it also allows you in some ways to build an audience on your own terms. So a lot of people discover me through my journalism and then move back to the books and the articles. So it's a very interesting audience building strategy as well. Now look, the conversation exists. I don't publish with them. I'm not saying you don't, probably a good idea. I don't publish with them because they don't pay authors. And I'm a big believer that people should be paid for the work that they do. I may publish with them at some point, but for you at this juncture, it is something to consider. But also, let me just put in here, don't believe the nonsense that people say that endlessly you must do stuff for free because, oh, it's important for the CV. Do it for free. Oh, yeah, look, it's good for the CV. That's true to a certain point, and I did a lot of journalism early on free, but I did it for free to learn, to build my profile, so that at a certain point I wouldn't do it for free. You with me? So do it for free, knowing that at a certain point you'll do it for pay. That's important. Get paid. Don't do stuff for free. I also recommend, in terms of payment, go to authorspublish.com. Authorspublish.com. All disciplines, all nations, all languages. Once a week, a newsletter is sent out with an email about all the publications that are open for submission and the payment involved in those. And look, I've only used them, say, a couple of times for an interesting or quirky article for which I was paid. But what I love about that weekly email, which I read and enjoy, is you get a real sense about the changes to international publishing, but you see the opportunities for journalism and writing for pay that emerge. It's a useful service, I think, because you can start to see the alternative ways of expressing your research and your ideas. And look, journalism does matter. And I'll be pretty honest with this, I think probably the reason I got this current job, yeah, there's probably lots of reasons, I'm hoping there's lots of reasons, but I do think probably the reason I got it is I write for the Times Higher Education. That's why I got the job. 5, use deterritorialized media to add to every event, every publishing event, every moment of your career. What really bores and indeed worries me about all this networking stuff is we don't talk about what networking actually is and means. So much of this nonsense is about, look, PhD students go to a conference and that's how they're networking. But look, you go to the conference, you spend all this money, wasted all this time traveling, and 8 people are in that room watching you deliver that piece, and 7 of them are other PhD students. So how useful is that? So much of networking is seen to be sort of accidental. Well, we don't have time for accidental networking now. We need reality and we need stuff that we have control over. So I don't use the word networking because I believe in the word relationships. And what I've done throughout my career is not be interested in people for what they can do for me. I've never been interested in that or what I can do for them. That's not a thing. I form authentic relationships with some of the best and most interesting and quirky scholars in the world. I care for them. They're my friends. Yeah? So you're forming relationships, authentic communication systems. And that's the gift of deterritorialization and digitization. They don't have to accidentally have arrived in a conference room in San Diego. Okay? Oh, wow, I've just met somebody in San Diego. That's great. It's much more authentic, and digitization allows you to meet people without having to have them share an actual space with you. So when an article is published, put it on Facebook, share it with your friends, put it on Twitter, put it on LinkedIn. If people aren't interested, they won't read it. But it is there, and you'll be amazed how many people you will meet through the sharing of ideas. And isn't that the reason we got into this gig in the first place? So I'd also say get onto Orchid. Now, this really matters. So it's ORCID, orchid.org. Get on it early. It's important now. It's important to the future. It's important full stop, orchid.org. And why it's important for you to do it now, particularly those of you in the theoretical social sciences and the humanities, is the harvesting of your publications is done very, very badly. Okay, because it's reliance on Web of Science, or it's reliant on Scopus, and their management of humanities and theoretical social science research is very poor. Sorry, but it is. So if you can get in early on Orchid and one at a time as your publications come in, start to add them, that's the way to do it. So get into Orchid now. I'm doing that work now. Now I've got like 300 publications that I'm trying to make sure they're correct at the moment. So at this stage late in your career, it's a bit of a nightmare to wrangle what's going on with Orchid, but start early and start to develop it. Put good time into Orchid, that's big. So therefore, don't be bedazzled by the word networking. Think about what relationships are meaningful to you. How will you meet people who will be able to hire you? Look, it won't be through hoping for the best that somebody's going to accidentally be at a conference. Okay, that's just random. You might be lucky, but the chances are you won't be. And you need to be authentic. You need to organize your digital life in a way that is enabling for your analog life as a human as much as an academic. It is therefore important that you don't lie, you don't spruik, you don't exaggerate who you are and your career. This is about authenticity, meaningful relationships with people. Not about, oh, I need this relationship and I'll get a job. Those relationships are meaningful over decades. They're precious. So guard them and care for them. Nurture those relationships. You need to claim an academic job on your own terms. It needs to be real. You're getting this job for who you are, not for who you've lied, who you've constructed as sort of this arbitrary, imagined version of yourself. So therefore, gaining an academic job is based on really, really hard work. An absolute slog, guys. It is a slog. It's grinding out publications. Getting up early, even if every fibre of your being is screaming to stay in bed. It's getting up, grinding out those publications, showing innovation and independence. That's what people want to see. Showing that you can teach by teaching. Showing that you can teach by thinking about teaching and exhibiting that thought. But you also have to be lucky. You have to be lucky that you have a skill set that can solve the problem for that university at that particular time. That requires some luck. But you also have to be ready when that opportunity appears. To be successful to gain an academic job, it must start with self-assessment. What are my qualifications? What are my weaknesses? How am I going to manage those weaknesses? What are my strengths? And how can they enable the strength of this university? And remember, tailor every single application. Do not rely on generic applications. So yes, there'll be a lot that's similar between applications, but do spend the time to think, what is that institution's problems? Why are they advertising? And how can I solve that problem? Therefore, show how you will fit into the future of that university. So as you can see, there's no way to pretty this up. There's a hell of a lot of heavy lifting involved here. There is no shortcut to work. There is no shortcut to the hard work you're going to have to do. But what I always say is, you can't manage international higher education, but you can control what you can control. Do the work that creates line after line after line on your CV. And at this point of your career, it's about fleshing out your capacity, showing who you are now and showing who you can be. Luck, hard work, persistence, and building authentic relationships are the foundation to an outstanding academic career. You got this. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tia.